order of business is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move ahead as planned. Next is approval of the March 21st minutes of the committee. Any discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll need a motion and a second on this.
Elaine Kutsukos moves approval of minutes.
Thanks, Elaine. We got a motion. Do we have a second?
Jason Piper will second from Hennepin.
All right, thank you, Jason. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, go to roll call. Robbie?
Thank you, Chair. Onoka County, OJ. Oh, sorry, Abda.
Nick Dobda in place for Jerry OJ. So I wasn't at the meeting, but present.
Is that an aye vote?
Well, I wasn't asked to approve the minutes, but present.
Okay. Abstain. Carver County, Melky. Dakota County. Hennepin County, Piper.
Aye.
Scott County, Jessen.
Aye.
Washington County, Dahlheimer. Bloomington, Kiel. Eden Prairie, Ellis.
Aye.
Ridley, Kozlucher.
Aye.
Minneapolis Engineering, Coster.
Aye.
Plymouth, Chair Thompson.
Aye.
St. Paul Engineering, Weber.
Aye.
Metro Transit, Genowiak.
Aye. Aye.
Suburban Transit, Scholl.
Aye.
DNR Spooner Walsh. MnDOT Bike Ped, Samuelson.
I also wasn't here, so I'll just vote present.
MnDOT Metro District, Tag.
Aye.
MnDOT State Aid, Brown.
Aye.
MPCA, AO. MTS, Henniker.
Aye.
And Tab Coordinator, Kotsukos.
Aye.
Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you, Robbie. Next, we have public comment on committee business. I guess I would ask staff, did we have anybody sign up or wish to speak today?
We did not receive any, Chair.
Okay, I'm still waiting for that first person to show up and say something. All right, next we'll go to Elaine with the TAB report.
Thank you, Chair. TAB met yesterday afternoon for the chair's report. Chair Hovland reported that TAB executive had met prior to TAB. The committee discussed the challenges of scoring the unique projects, especially studies. There was no TAB member for MnDOT present, but Chair Hovland did announce that it was National Work Zone Awareness Week. For the MPCA, Frank Kolash reported that the MPCA is working with 6 port authorities and 8 private companies to develop a grant application for the Inflation Reduction Act's Clean Grants Program, which is an electrification opportunity focused on port operations throughout the state. There is $2 billion available throughout the country, and MPCA will apply before the May 2024 deadline. Kolash responded to a question regarding a plan to replace electric vehicle charging stations at rest stops, and that is something MnDOT is working on. MPCA is working on placing EV charging stations throughout the state on major corridors. There was no MAC report. For the Metropolitan Council, Deb Barber reported that the region began receiving funds as part of the federal IIJA bill for carbon reduction activities. The council approved using the carbon reduction funding in a 2022 regional solicitation for the years 23, 24, and 25 for almost 24 million. Since then, the council formed a climate action work group, and the council recommends allocating the carbon reductions funds for the years 2026 and 2027 in the 24 regional solicitation. The funding totals approximately 16 million. For the years 2028 and beyond, the council requests that the funding be considered as part of the regional solicitation evaluation and that a specific process be designed for allocation of the funds. For the Suburban Transit Association, Gary Hansen reported that the Suburban Transit Association Board appointed Burnsville City Council member and MBTA Board Chair Dan Keeley as the new TAB alternate. And Suburban Transit Providers reported MS receipts are as expected to even slightly higher. Their Maple Grove is reporting that their microtransit service remains strong and that capacity and service hours will be expanded May 1st. And MBTA's fixed route ridership is up 16%, and Connect microtransit ridership is up 24%. Our TAB member Julie Jepson is serving on the Advisory Council of Traffic Safety, and she provided an update on that council. This was created in 2023 to advise the governor and commissioners on transportation safety and health. And Julie Jepson presented information on a new product created through the Minnesota IT Services that shows the types and locations of crash data in Minnesota. And the application will go public soon. For the TAC report, Jenny Hager, chair, reported that TAC postponed the action on the greenhouse gas targets. This was requested by FHWA. They will take up action when FHWA lets them know to go forward. For business items, TAB approved a streamlined tip amendment for the 2 project adjustments. One was a cost increase of an Inver Grove Heights CSAH 32 reconstruction project, and the other was an increase of MnDOT's I-94 bridge repair project. These were not solicitation projects. There was a scope change approved for Hennepin County CSAH 52 and CSAH 66 that went through funding and programming, and they approved the program year extension request for MnDOT's US Highway 8 HSIP project. There were 2 information items. First was on regional solicitation updates. The policymaker work group has been formed. Will have its first meeting on April 25th. The active transportation work group recommended that up to 15 million of active transportation funds be added to the 2024 regional solicitation funding scenarios, with at least 1 project in the trails, pedestrian, and safe routes to school categories, and looking at projects with a maximum request of 2 million. The unique project scoring committee provided recommendations for funding projects and also recommendations for future consideration, including codifying and describing the scoring methodology that was used, consider a separate category for studies, develop grant writing assistance, and that TAB be specific on what they are looking for in this category. Bethany, MTS staff, presented the results of the regional solicitation survey. And then Steve Peterson presented a base scenario with $200 million allocated to the midpoint of the modal categories. And then TAB recommended that the council staff add in up to 15 million of active transportation funds using the recommendations of the active transportation work group, along with consideration for geographic balance. Also add in carbon reduction funds, and then some over programming. And the scenarios they looked at were the midpoint and also a higher modal shift for bicycle and pedestrian category. And then for transportation funding overview, Amy Benovitz began her presentation. She discussed finance in the 2021 Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, revenue and spending by MnDOT Metro District, and regional transit. The presentation went long, so it will continue at the May meeting with discussion on local government funding and revenue spending, and also the regional dollars. And that's my report.
Great, thank you, Elaine. Any questions on the tab report?
Chair, this is Jason from Hennepin with a question.
Yeah, go for it, Jason.
Chair, during yesterday's tab meeting, there was extensive dialogue on the active transportation funding and kind of the use of 15 million towards the 2024 regional solicitation. Kind of a talking point shared by one of the tab members was geographic balance, and that kind of struck me since the active transportation funding is made available through the Metro sales tax. So it kind of feels a little bit more localized than some of our federal funding that gets collected kind of through the gas tax and up through the highway trust fund. So just curious if there's been much discussion at TAC or TAB exec or the active transportation work group about what geographical balance could look like for the active transportation funding.
The active transportation work group did not discuss this. This was recommended at TAB, and part of it is going to be determined on which projects actually ranked high enough in order for them to do that. We're gonna have to wait to see what comes through when the funding is added to see if that's even possible.
Yeah, to answer your question too, I am on the work group, Jason. There's a lot of nuances that we're not really sure what to do. So I think this was just more of, hey, we want to put a little bit of this money to work up front, but there's major details to figure out down the road. So what if this 15 million, it's not going to be perfectly allocated, but that work group's going to continue to meet because there's other questions, about balance. And then also, the counties are receiving a large chunk of active transportation and the cities are not. So how does that play into this? So there are a lot of details to get figured out with how that money is allocated fairly in the future. And so that work group is going to have its work cut out for it. So hopefully that gives you just a little snippet of the discussion.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention that that was just one of the recommendations was put the funding in active transportation. They had not looked at the geographic balance themselves because it depended on their recommendation was funding the higher ranked projects that could go in 25 and 26. So that was their first recommendation to get the funding out the door, rewarding the highest ranked projects that could go early.
Yes.
And then they're also going to consider looking at whether to do a 2025 solicitation. So that's next on their considerations. And then what to do with after that for the 26 and beyond.
Yeah. So there was a lot of discussion on, we want to make sure that these are state funds. So we don't want to go through a federal process for these monies in the future, in the long term. So the solicitation might be outside of our regular solicitation. So quite a bit of discussion, but any other questions on that, Jason?
No, thank you very much, Chair. Just the comment made by the tab member really made an impression on me. So that triggered my question today. Thank you.
And I want to make one little correct. It's not state funding, it's metro area funding. It's a local funding.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I meant non-federal. Sorry.
Yes, yeah, I just wanted to.
Non-federal. That was my point. But yeah, thanks for the correction.
Yeah, because the comment was made also because the funding is being raised throughout the metro area, and which is why they wanted to bring up the fact that you do want to spend the money throughout the metro area.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions for Elaine before we move on to our business items today?
Hey, Chair, Nathan here from Minneapolis. Elaine, you mentioned some over programming that tab members discussed. can you share any more details, or maybe it didn't go into that level of detail other than just some?
We didn't go into specific details. However, a TAB executive, they did discuss adding some and then leaving it open to have some additional funding being added for the geographic balance. What happened last round is we overprogrammed them up to the highest amount we thought they wanted. And then they were stuck with, if they wanted to do something different, they had to take money away from a project to move it to something they wanted. By not going fully to 10 to 12% over programming, this will give them some flexibility to do some of that balancing by adding projects instead of adding and taking away. So we might, I don't know, staff will take a look at adding, adding the active transportation fund, the carbon reduction, maybe adding somewhere between 6 to 8% over programming, see we rebalance out and then work from there. As it goes through the committees, they can add projects in whatever category they want.
Here, one follow-up is, I think this group might want to think about is a look back, since we overprogrammed so much last cycle, is if staff could look at what the status of all that money is. If we just keep kicking this can down the road, maybe there's a time at which we might say TAB might want more, but it might be more prudent to stay closer to the target. That's all I have.
Yeah, and on my own personal thought is, as the active transportation committee is meeting, if they decide not to do a 2025 solicitation, there may be some advantage to putting more money in to fund some projects that could start in 2027. Only because I looked at, if we select projects at the end of 2026, you're already in the 2027 program year.
All right, thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Nathan, for the.
And I see Steve made a comment about the active transportation work group meeting. Is that the policymaker work group meeting on the 25th?
They're both on the same day, in fact.
Okay, that's.
Yep,
Okay.
The first is the policy work group, and then back to back is the active transportation group. So we'll have a full day.
All right, thank you, Elaine. We'll move on to our business items now. First up is the 2024 Regional Solicitation Scoring Change. So I believe Joe will be presenting on this.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So following the March F&P meeting, just before the April TAC meeting, the City of Farmington informed us that its application had an errant selection within the right-of-way portion of the risk assessment, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but in that particular category, the multi-use trail category, it kind of is. So they marked the box that awarded more points than they should have received. They marked that they didn't have any right-of-way, and they should have marked one that would only give them a 25% of this point. So implementation of that change, that sort of self-reported change, would lead to a 25-point reduction in the risk assessment, along with a 1-point reduction in cost effectiveness, which is a 26-point reduction overall. Robbie, could you go to the tables that show the change in ranking? So this would also change the ranking. So that top one here is where they were at last month when it was approved by funding and programming. And the bottom one is where this change would move them. So we brought this up at TAC, and TAC members basically thought, well, funding and programming finalizes the score, so they should make official this score, assuming that you would want to make the change. So we're bringing this to you to sort of finalize the scores yet a second time. None of the other scoring categories are impacted, so we're just showing down to the impacted scores in this category for the sake of simplicity. That's all I have.
Okay, and how was the error caught? Was it self-reported, or did staff?
It was self-reported. They emailed us on April 2nd and said, we realized we checked the wrong one when we were in a meeting discussing the project. It's kind of unprecedented.
Yeah, okay. So you need an action here just to codify the revised scoring then.
Yeah, so approval of changing this score and the requested action there at the top, or in the recommended motion approval of this score change, and then that would finalize the already finalized scores, I suppose.
Blaine Kutsukos makes a motion to approve this scoring change.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Kaslucha from Fridley, I'll second.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll vote by roll call. Robbie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Do we have any representatives from Anoka, Carver, or Dakota? Hennepin County, Piper.
Aye.
Scott County, Jessen.
Aye.
Washington County, Dahlheimer.
Aye.
Bloomington, Keel. Eden Prairie, Ellis.
Aye.
Ridley, Kozlucher.
Aye.
Minneapolis Engineering, Coster.
Aye.
Plymouth, Chair Thompson.
Aye.
St. Paul Engineering, Weber.
Aye.
Metro Transit, Genowiak.
Aye.
Suburban Transit, Scholl.
Aye.
Spooner Walsh. Samuelson.
Aye.
MDOT Metro District, Tag.
Aye.
MDOT State Aid, Brown.
Aye.
MPCA, AL. Council MTS, Henniker.
Aye.
Tab Coordinator Kutsukos.
Aye.
Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you, Robbie. The motion passes. The next item of business is program year extension, Washington County's CSAH 17, Highway 36, intersection improvement. Turn it over to you, Robbie.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a program year extension request for Washington County's Lake Elmo and Minnesota 36 intersection improvement project. They're requesting to move from program year 25 to 26. So Washington County was awarded $10 million in 2020 Regional Solicitation Strategic Capacity category for this project. And then beginning in 21, they began engaging the community and doing work for potential alternatives. And in this request, Washington County staff have outlined the landmarks they've achieved so far and the things that still need to be completed prior to bid letting. And then given those landmarks yet to be reached, they do not believe they can begin bid letting until January 26 outside of the current program year. So that's why they're requesting this extension from 25 to 26. For the program year extension policy, they are required to fill out a score sheet. And in this score sheet, they scored 5 out of 7. 7 points is typically required for recommending approval from staff. Washington County is submitting this program year extension a full 9 months ahead of what would be the deadline of December before the program year they would before their current program year ends. So it's reasonable to expect that if they submitted this in December that they would achieve 7 out of 7 for the score sheet. So that's why even though they score 5 out of 5 points on the score sheet, we're still recommending for approval of this motion to recommending that they move from program year 25 to 26. And I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. Any questions, or is the applicant on?
Chair, Kevin Peterson is here with Washington County.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't have much to add. I appreciate the committee hearing this. As noted by planner here, we are well on our way to this project. We just did some extra work to to ensure both of our community partners were fully supportive. Coincidentally, on May 7th of this year, so in about 2 weeks, we do expect both city councils to formally support our preliminary engineering plan. So as noted, we would fully expect to secure the remaining points needed before the end of this year, and if not, in the next few months. So we're well on our way in this project, and just appreciate the understanding here with this extension.
All right, thank you, Kevin. All right, any questions for Kevin or any discussion on this item?
Mr. Chair, Colleen Brown recommends approval of the extension request.
Okay, Nathan, if your hand's up, I'll come to you after we have a motion. So thank you, Colleen. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Robert Ellis, Eden Prairie.
Thank you, Robert. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'll go to Nathan first.
Chair, and then this could go to Robbie or it was Kevin. If this is on its way, what's the impetus for bringing it now in April as compared to later this year? Is there a project risk or something that we need to be aware of? I just feel like that's a missing gap in the story. I'm curious, since it sounds like it will be on track, but it doesn't meet the threshold now. I guess that would give me some pause to vote for approval. If we know it doesn't meet the threshold, then there's time to do that action when all those work tasks will be completed to meet those thresholds. Thank you.
There hasn't been one.
Chair, do you want me to take that?
Yeah, 1 second. David Vessel, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same.
All right, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you if you want to answer that first.
Yeah, Chair Nathan, appreciate the question. I think we just see the writing on the wall that it's going to be, impossible to get this delivered in that program year. So we really, more than anything, just wanted to be proactive. And in working with Colleen, it was suggested that we bring this as soon as possible.
All right. Yeah, when Colleen says something, you want to listen. So I hear you. So she always has good advice. Okay. Any other discussion? All right. So we have a motion.
Mr. Chair, Jim Kaslucher, Fridley. Just wanted to say appreciate that being proactive and getting this in front of the group ahead. My read from the staff memo is that this is supported and that they would achieve those points, and that's kind of the staff's judgment as well.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We've had our additional discussion, so we'll go to a vote here. So I'll turn it over to staff for a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with Hennepin County Piper.
Aye.
Scott County Jessen.
Aye.
Washington County Dahlheimer.
Aye.
Eden Prairie Ellis.
Aye.
Ridley Kozlucher.
Aye.
Minneapolis Coster.
I'm going to abstain from this one.
Okay. Plymouth Chair Thompson.
Aye.
And I recognize Nicholas Dabda's chat there. Do we recognize a vote from Anoka County, Dabda?
Yeah, Anoka County will be aye.
Okay, thank you. St. Paul Weber. Metro Transit Genowiak.
Aye.
Suburban Transit Shoal. MnDOT Bike Ped Samuelson.
Aye.
MnDOT Metro District Tag.
Aye.
MnDOT State Aid Brown.
Aye.
Met Council MTS Hinneker.
Aye.
Tab Coordinator Kutsukos.
Aye.
Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you, Rob. All right, the next item of business is the regionally significant TIP amendment request, Highway 10 expansion project. I think, Robbie, this is yours again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, so this is a regionally significant TIP amendment request for the US 10 expansion project. So for regionally significant, for the formal TIP amendment request, we are considering recommending this for releasing for public comment. And this project is expanding US 10 from 2 to 3 lanes in Coon Rapids. This is funded through $30 million in bond funding, $8 million in quarters of commerce. So you'll see 2 different SP numbers for this TIP amendment. Some paper rustling from Kozlucher. And here's a map of the corridor. Runs from Hanson up to Round Lake on US 10. I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Robbie on this item?
Yes.
Somebody had a question? Okay. See none. Need a motion and an action on this item.
Mr. Chair, Kaslucher, Fridley, I'll move approval. Sorry about the rustling. I was just excited about this project.
All right. Well, hey, you got the motion in, so that's good. Now mute your mic, will you? All right. Do we have a second?
Dahlheimer.
Right. I heard Dahlheimer first over tag, so we'll go with Dahlheimer. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? All right. So we have a motion as recommended by staff in the report, and we'll take the vote on it. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. Anoka County Dabda.
Aye.
Hennepin County Piper.
Aye.
Scott County Jessen.
Aye.
Washington County Dahlheimer.
Aye.
Eden Prairie Ellis.
Aye.
Ridley Kozlucher.
Aye.
Minneapolis Coster.
Aye.
Plymouth Chair Thompson.
Aye.
St. Paul Weber. Metro Transit Janawiak.
Aye.
Suburban Transit Shoal.
Aye.
MnDOT Bike Ped Samuelson.
Aye.
MnDOT Metro District Tag.
Aye.
MnDOT State Aid Brown.
Aye.
My Council MTS Hinneker.
Aye.
Tab Coordinator Kotsukos.
Aye.
Chair, the motion passes. All right, the last item of business today before we get into the fun informational items is a scope change request, Metro Transit Regional Mobility Hubs. So I think we're going to go back to Joe on this one.
Yes, thanks, Chair. We're saving the best, or at least the most interesting, for last here. It's a bit unique in a couple of ways. Share the screen first. So this is a unique in that it's the first time we've had a unique project come up for a scope change request, among other uniquenesses here. So Metro Transit was awarded this project $1.6 million in the unique projects category to fund 7 mobility hubs. I'm gonna go down to the map, which I think is where I started. Basically, these blue hubs one of these 3 hubs down here on Lake, and then
Pardon me, Chair. I just want to make sure that Joe will share his screen.
Yeah, we're not seeing your screen.
oh, I always forget to hit that last share button.
There you go.
Okay, so they were given funding to install 7 mobility hubs, 1 in St. Paul, 2 up here in the suburbs, and then 5 in Minneapolis. That includes 1 of these 3 on Lake here, along with this Riverside Plaza one, the 26th and Central, which they're proposing to move down about a mile to 14th and Central, and Penn and Lowry, which they're proposing to move down to 26th and Nicollet. So there's a lot going on here, and I'll try to get us through it. So the city is Minneapolis is sort of a subrecipient to the 4 hubs here, and we're not talking about these 3 suburban or 1 St. Paul and 2 suburban sites at all. We're talking about primarily 2 Minneapolis sites. So the request is to move Central Avenue Northeast from and 26th Avenue down to 14th Avenue Northeast, basically right here on the same, about a mile apart. The rationale for this move is that the site planning and F-line ABRT station planning make this the applied for site less desirable for multimodal connectivity, and it lacks the ability to fit the designated project features. The alternative site is located a mile south and is city-owned and will have a better connection to the F-line. The second move would be this Penn and Lowry down to this green circle at 26 at Nicollet. A key rationale for this desired move includes safety concerns at the Penn Avenue location. The alternative site located roughly 5 miles away is demographically similar to the original site, has stronger community support, and is fully controlled by the city of Minneapolis. So as we look through our usual process, again, this is a unique project, so it's a little bit of a unique process as well. Sorry, there's a lot of pages in this. We don't really think a scoring analysis is really applicable, and this is a unique project. It was scored primarily quantitatively by a TAB committee. That said, it had a significant scoring gap over the one project that wasn't selected. It scored 3.0 points average from the scoring committee. 3.1 was given to the other application that was funded, and 2.1 to the one that wasn't. So it had a pretty nice cushion, and we don't think there would be any reason to not allow this based on scoring considerations. For the geography that we talked about with the 2 relocations, one is only a mile down the street, one is quite a ways away, and so you have several options here. You could allow the relocations, you could allow the project to occur with the hubs removed or one of the hubs removed, or you could just deny the request. This is a very odd scenario. It doesn't have a lot of precedent. Those 2 pieces I have there, 2019-09 and 2018-22, are sort of the best precedent we could find. One was a replacement of an on-street bike lane with installation of some ADA ramps. And another one was allowing replacement of intersections to be being removed with other project work. And so that's and that was a project that had a lot of activities going on to help with non-motorized transportation movement. And there's a bit of a similarity here in that we'll see points in some projects move from here to here for various reasons. And so you could certainly argue that's what the applicant is asking for in this case. And then we've got the budgetary items that they mentioned. They had discussed changing some of the elements in their project. Some of the technology in their budget is probably a little higher than they want to go, and some of the other elements could be raised in lieu of that. And so from the staff perspective, we actually see changes like this a lot. You could almost argue this wouldn't be a scope change request. The projects in the application aren't really spelled out. They say several things that they're going to be doing at the hubs. And so this change doesn't appear to be a direct contradiction of that scope. And we talked with Colleen about some of the things you might see budget-wise. And so some of these changes are sharp, but that's not necessarily something that we have a history of really pouring over nitpicking in terms of details when we have a sort of multifaceted project like this that doesn't have a lot of rigid sort of, we're putting this item here, and this item here. So it doesn't seem to be all that much of a concern. And then, of course, whenever we do scope changes, we talk about the potential changes related to taking away federal funds. I probably put more potential options and sub-options of options than anybody wanted to see. And I think I won't go through those at this moment. I think we can talk about those depending on what the rest of the. I think if we recommend just allowing the entire scope change to go through as requested, we probably wouldn't need to address this at all. But if you start doing other things, we'll start talking about ways to remove or to suggest removal of federal funding. So I know that's a lot. I know this is very unique. I think we have an applicant here to talk about it. Otherwise, I would stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Joe. Yeah, I would like to hear from the applicant as well regarding this request if they're on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is Meredith Klikatka. I'm the project manager for Metro Transit for the Hub project. Russ Brooks is also on. He's the PM for Minneapolis. Joe, you did a really nice job giving an overview on this very unique project. Thanks for your consideration in the scope change. You know, these proposed changes are really just going to allow us to deliver a stronger project in the end. And we really believe that the result is more mobility benefits, which was the goal, both of the unique project category, but specifically for this project in the communities that these regional hubs are in. And I know the location changes quite a distance away, so I'm happy to answer any questions. Russ is also on if you have any questions here.
All right, thank you, Meredith. Any questions for staff or the applicant at this point? Any hands raised? I guess so, for the applicant or maybe Minneapolis. So the Penn and Lowry station obviously is being removed, and those where a number of these other sites are. So are we just giving up on North Minneapolis and just because of safety issues, or it seems like the whole goal of this project is placemaking and making improvements, and so I guess that's something that jumps out at me and would like to know a little bit more about that.
Sure, thanks, Chair. You know, the relocation for the North Minneapolis hub is really about community and stakeholder feedback, and I will turn it over to Russ, who actually facilitated the discussion. There's been a pilot site there for a number of years, or there was a pilot site there for a number of years. So Russ, if you're on, if you want to talk a little bit more about MPD concerns.
Sure. So thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Chair. I would just say that the site changes really are a response to them and Minneapolis Police Department, the local council member, Hennepin County had concerns over that site for safety and security last year due to loitering and other unwanted behavior and some violence. And so they asked us to remove the pilot site that we had from that location. And Hennepin County terminated the agreement that we had with them over that parcel, and they fenced off the property. And so our concern was really, one, just trying to listen to changing conditions on the ground from the community and be responsive to their desires.
All right, thank you, Ross. Any other questions or comments? Jim?
Yeah, Jim Kislucher, Fridley. Just curious if I think there's 7 sites here, right? And I'm just curious about like what internal evaluation happened with Metro Transit, and whether there's like where the 8th site was it, or 8th and 9th maybe? Were they at these 2 locations?
Thank you. Sorry, you're asking in the kind of master project list of hub sites or potential investment sites, were these, you know, kind of the next tier of scoring?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you for
So,
putting it more directly than I did.
These sites actually are selected because they're part of the top 50 regionally significant mobility hub sites. That was the Met Council plan that was put out there. And where these two ranked, that's a really good question. I'll turn it over to Russ as to why these two as opposed to any other within the city of Minneapolis sites.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and Chair. I think really the sites were selected. One of the concerns that we had in the city was controlling the property after terminating the agreement at Penn and Lowry, and our desire and our city engineers' desire to control the property, and so that narrowed the list to begin with. And both the parcel at 14th and Central is a parcel that's owned by the city. It's an off-street parcel, and then at 26th and Nicollet, this would be the first time we do a mobility hub in a floating parking lane, and so it's within the right of way, which gives us control over that as well. So that was really a big deciding factor once we got down to narrowing the list of where it was feasible to put a hub that we could fit, but then additionally one that fit really well programmatically and helped us to really achieve our goals.
All right, Jim, does that answer your question?
I think so. I mean, I think there's, there's some response there to suitability. I was kind of curious, like, were these in, kind of in a, high up on the list, but apparently they made a list. So that's kind of, that's what I was looking for.
All right. Any other questions, comments, motion?
Chair, I wanted to make a comment. Elaine started off the TAB summary today, just talking about a lot of the comments we got from TAB about unique projects. And just thinking back to a couple of years ago, there was a lot of pressure from TAB to be more unique, more unique, more unique. And that was like a big theme as we went through scenarios. So I just want to recall to that of like how these applicants, not just this one, but others, were being asked to push the limits. And when we do push the limits, federal projects aren't always easy to deliver, but I think it is good to remind ourselves, like, they were, like, a lot of the applicants were being asked to do more, think really creative and trying to deliver thoughtful applications. And I think this is responding to a lot of the suitability, deliverability questions while also fulfilling and following through on the application to deliver mobility hubs in the region. So just a little bit of a history of like where we were a couple of years ago with this application and how the project sponsors are trying to respond to that and deliver on that commitment in the application.
All right, thank you for those comments, Nathan.
Mr. Chair, this is Cole from Met Council, if I may.
Yep.
Kind of just seconding Nathan's comments, but also adding it might be worthwhile for us in whatever motion we decide to put forward to just note that we don't have a history on how to do scope changes for unique projects. And so like just kind of basically saying we don't want it to necessarily be precedent setting, but we want to be acknowledging the unique circumstances of the project. And so I think that can be, whether it's in our motion or just comments that get brought forward to TAB for you to consider. This is all obviously very, very unique, and we don't have a history of how to handle these.
Thank you for that. All right, usually when there's silence, it means somebody's ready to make a motion.
Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the relocation of the two hubs and to maintain the budget shift from technology to amenities.
All right, thank you, Nathan. We have a motion. Do we have a second on that?
Chair, I have a question on the motion. This is Jason.
Yeah, Jason, what's your question?
Should our motion also include a recommendation on the funding award, whether that should be retained?
I assume it would be unless we say we're taking money away. So is how I interpret it, but I guess I could refer that to staff if that should be in the motion.
Chair, I like the idea of adding that to the motion. And that might be on us for not writing in there, but yeah, I like the idea of adding that just to clarify if that is where the motion is going to go.
Chair, would it be easier if it's two motions or one? I was debating that.
I don't think it makes a difference. I don't know that separating them is gonna change how people are gonna vote, but you're the motioner, so I would leave it up to you if you want to keep your original motion and just add the additional amount about retaining, or if you want your original motion to stand as is.
I thought I included that the way I phrased it. I made the motion to approve the relocation of the two hubs and to retain the technology budget with a shift to amenities. If I misstated or misclarified, I'd be happy to retract and restate it again.
No, I think that makes it clear to me. And so that makes sense. So keeping the money, but just shifting budget from technology to that works. Do we have a second on that?
Chair, this is Jason. I will second.
All right. Thank you, Jason. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Right. Hearing none, we will go to roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Anoka County Dabda.
Aye.
Hennepin County Piper.
Aye.
Scott County Jessen.
Aye.
Washington County Dahlheimer.
Aye.
Eden Prairie Ellis.
Aye.
Ridley Kozlucher.
Aye.
Minneapolis Coster. Plymouth Chair Thompson.
Aye.
St. Paul Weber.
Aye.
Metro Transit Genowiak.
Aye.
Suburban Transit Scholl.
Aye.
And Bike Ped Samuelson.
Aye.
MnDOT Metro District Tag.
Aye.
MnDOT State Aid Brown.
Aye.
My Council MTS Hinneker.
Aye.
Coordinator Kotsukos.
Aye.
Chair, and the motion passes.
Okay, well, that went better than I thought it would. That was fairly quick on that item. So thank you, Joe, for the presentation there, and the applicant representatives. Thank you for your time today. Okay, next we are going to informational items. First up would be Steve with the scores and scenario, and I believe he has a presentation for us today.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So some of this information we presented yesterday at TAB. Some of the slides you'll see in the slide deck here, we just copied directly over just to give you, just to keep you up to date on some of the topics and PowerPoint slides that we presented, or the committee chairs in two of the cases. The committee chairs that were TAB members presented those parts of the item. So this is the first look at what we call the base scenario, and we'll explain what that is and the process moving forward here. But I would say we've got April, May, and then at the June meeting of funding and programming is when we'll be asking for an action item to actually approve a project list. So really three opportunities here. to take a look at the different themes and such. So next slide, please. Okay, one more. So the other attachment, and we'll go to that in just a second, that we put together is based on just part of the money. So that we've said that at tab kind of really clearly. This is $200 million, and what that amounts to essentially is the surface transportation block grant money, the CMAQ money, and the transportation alternatives money, and those are the traditional three programs that have been used to be part of the regional solicitation. It does not include the new programs, nor does it include any over programming. And so, as Elaine led in her tab report, what we're trying to do this time is not delete projects along the way. We're trying to build a base. That's why we call it the base scenario, and keep adding different funding sources to it to go further down those lists and give you some options in which direction you want to go there. So there's probably roughly about $60 million or so that is not yet allocated. Some of it has very specific purposes. Others is more general in nature. So the pieces that aren't are shown here: carbon reduction, which is $15 million that we just got direction yesterday on adding that to the solicitation. The protect, which is about $7.3 million for 2 years of funding. Active transportation, which we heard yesterday at tab, they directed us to put $15 million in for this pilot project. And then any over programming, and we'll see kind of where that lands. There's a few questions that we asked of tab, not for a decision, but just to think about for the next meeting. One of them relates to the transit projects, and we'll talk about that maybe in looking at the projects. And number two was how much over programming would they like to see? So those are two kind of general questions. We said start thinking about that, because that will help us kind of firm up the project list in the future. What we did ask them on the next slide here is with some of the remaining funding that's not kind of earmarked, like the active transportation or something. What sort of themes or funding scenarios would you like us to put together? So we had three ideas, and this is what we brought to TAC earlier in April as well. So one, keep distributing based on the same methodology on the midpoints of those modal funding ranges. Two would be a bike ped heavy that would, this would be consistent with the survey results that you heard about last month from Bethany and Tom Holmes. And then three, we thought, well, maybe it'd be prudent to develop a safety related themed scenario. And this would would be exclusively on the roadway funding, because that's the one area where we have a common metric for safety that we can use across the categories. And that being, we would use the benefit cost analysis from the HSIP applications, that same measure. So it would be the monetized safety benefit over the total project cost. And so that's something that is measured across the application. So we can say, okay, if we're going to pick the last couple projects down these lists, so should we go down this list or this list based on that benefit cost ratio and the safety measure? So that was another idea we had, and we can see how that kind of shakes out as we put some more time into it. So with next, we're going to go back over to the spreadsheet, but did want to see if anyone has any questions first on these first two slides here. I know Michael's back. Okay. I see one here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have Jim. Question for Steve.
Yeah, Jim Kaslucher. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Jim Kaslucher with Fridley. Just wanted to ask, is the safety measure then essentially, or the safety kind of, I don't know, scenario, kind of like a sub scenario? Because it's not really taking into account all the applications, it's the roadway applications. And can that be like interchanged with like a midpoint and a bike heavy, either with or without the safety scenario?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Jim. So the answer is yes. Yeah, we'd the way I had framed it up would be like the midpoint would be 1A and the safety one would be the same distribution by mode, but it would be maybe more like a 1B. So yeah, it's an iteration of the midpoint scenario. That's how I would put together. Yeah. Which prompted another question. No, it didn't. Nope, he put it down. Okay. So Robbie, let's move on. Let's move to the spreadsheets here, and we can just spend some time. And we didn't do this really on purpose at TAB because we had a full agenda, and wanted to keep it more high level than to get into the project list. Kind of where that's at. So again, this is just part of the money, $200 million. We're probably going to end up somewhere around the 260 range or so once you add in all the different funding sources. And so we allocated this money based on the modal midpoints. So that again is 55.5% of the money went to roadways, 30% went to transit, and then 14.5% went to bicycle and pedestrian categories. So that's how we did it. And largely then we looked at within roadways here, you can see we get down about half of the way and down all of those lists. So we looked at the number of projects that were submitted and the amount of money that was available. And you can see as we scroll down on the roadways categories, we're getting about 50% of the way down that list. So traffic management technologies, 1 of 2, spot mobility, 5 of 10, strategic capacity, 3 of 6, roadway reconstruction, 8 of 17, so pretty close there. But that was the longest list where the most money went in the base scenario. And then lastly, you should talk about just a second the bridges. Again, we have a $10 million target that was approved by TAB in the application. So that puts you somewhere between funding 1 and 2 bridges. We thought it'd be probably make sense with 5 submitted that we would fund the first 2, which amounts to about $12 million going to bridges. So, and with them that pretty close to that target that TAB has established. The next page, please. And the other thing I should note before I forget too, we did set aside $4.5 million, which in past cycles was for unique projects to be selected at a different time. Obviously, we don't know if unique projects in its current form or at all will continue into the future based on the regional solicitation evaluation. That's kind of TAB's decision later, probably a year from now. But we did set aside at least that same chunk of money, $4.5 million, for distribution later. And I imagine if it's not for unique projects, there's other projects that could use near-term money. Just from looking at the lists and hearing from applicants that there's some that would like to go earlier anyway. So in transit, you've got the 2 competitive categories, transit expansion and modernization, with 5 and 4 applications received respectively in those 2 categories. And we're funding 4 of 5 in transit, so expansion, so that's good. And then right now 2 of 4 in transit modernization for sure can hit that third one, MVTA one, and that would be kind of more consistent between the 2 categories. And here's one of the questions we asked of TAB too. If you add up the transit expansion, modernization, the ABRT set aside, which we received that request for H line, and the set aside for TMOs and TDM projects for the future, that amount, and you fund all the projects, there's more money once you kind of add in over programming and some of the other sources than projects available. So we certainly can fund all of these projects and still have $6 million left over, at which point we kind of reallocate that money elsewhere to other projects and other modes. But last time TAB didn't want to go all the way down those lists. We did have a low scoring project last time. That's kind of at the end that they decided not to fund. This time, maybe a different story, maybe the same, but that's just one of the things that as we kind of play out the transit category that we're thinking about. At the bottom of this page is travel demand management. Again, that's money that was set aside last time in the amount of $1.2 million. And so these top three projects amount to $1.4 million. So again, with best to kind of fully fund those projects when you can, any project for that matter. So kind of made sense to fund the first three. And then the last category, well, second to last category, next slide here, or page, is the bicycle and pedestrian. Again, 14.5% of the total 200 million is going here. So what's that, $29 million out of the 200 million. And again, like last time, you may remember we funded or the amount of multi-use trail applications kind of far exceeds the amount of money that's available. And that was true again this time. We heard this at TAB a little bit yesterday, but you notice that a lot of the highest scoring projects also ask for the maximum amount award. So far out of the, in this base scenario, we're funding 5 out of 38, which doesn't look too good, but 3 of the 5 projects are asking for that maximum of $5.5 million. Not to say they're not great projects. They probably are. They scored high, but it does eat up a lot of money and makes it more difficult to get further down a really long list. So if you look at the bottom, like the subtotal there, out of the $29 million, $22 million is going to multi-use trails. So that's kind of the vast majority of the money based on the amount of applications, but still doesn't get you very far, I guess is the point there. We will, for the next, probably at the TAC meeting, we're going to layer in that $15 million of active transportation dollars that we were directed by TAB yesterday to include, and maybe just a second on that process. So again, we're looking for projects that are requested $2 million or less that could be delivered, start construction in either 25 or 2026 calendar year. We're high scoring, and then also met the additional 2 requirements in the state legislation, being that they're in a non-motorized plan or system plan, and there was another complete streets requirement. And so we reached out to applicants, asked them, like, if you weren't to federalize the project, could you meet that recommendation of starting construction in either 2025 or 2026 calendar year? Can you answer those 2 other requirements that I just outlined? And again, we were just sent it that were requests that were $2 million or less. So you'll see that again probably at the TAC meeting, next TAC meeting. So next page. Robbie, yeah, there you go. And so what we'll do on all of these lists, you'll see, especially on this page, all of the pedestrian facilities and all of the safe routes to school projects have a $2 million or less request because that's the maximum award. So based on the TAB direction, what we'll do next time you see this list is we will we'll start at the top of the list and say, okay, project number 1 in pedestrian facilities, City of Minneapolis, you scored the top, you were asked less than 2 million, you met all the requirements. And if you can deliver early, then we will give you the non-federal active transportation dollars and then push those federal dollars down. So there's an advantage to being the highest scoring project. You don't have to federalize the project, and you can save those costs and processes. So that's more to come, but just kind of tell you the process we're going to go through over the next few weeks to figure that out. But so pedestrian facilities right now out of the base, we're funding 3 of 17, and then safe routes to school 2 of 10. So that amounts to, again, the target was roughly 29 million, so just over 29 million of projects is shown there. Next slide. Next is unique projects. So we heard from Brian Martinson, TAB member, who was on the committee. Again, these were scored by TAB, and TAB made a recommendation as to what to fund. So the recommendation from that committee was to fund both the travel behavior inventory and the first top 3 highest scoring projects. Gets you about what we set aside, that $4.5 million, shy $8,000. And, you know, again, I imagine we'll fully fund that last project and not short at $8,000 just to fully fund it, but more to come. See, I think that's the last slide here. So, Mr. Chair, I will turn it back to you. And like I said, we didn't go through this level of detail or even bring up these slides at TAB yesterday, but did want to start going through it with this committee is really the first layer of seeing these funding options. All right, Michael may have had to step aside here. Robbie, who's the remind me who's the vice chair?
Vice Chair Keel, who is not present.
Not present. Okay. Maybe I'll just ask if there's any questions. It's just an information item here. So, oh, there he is.
All right, I'm done stepping away. Sorry. All right, any questions for Steve on the presentation? Like you said, it was just an informational item. But any thoughts or comments from the committee? Mike Samuelson, MnDOT.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Steve. Steve, you mentioned for the roadway categories, kind of going about halfway down with how he landed in this first split. Was that the kind of the criteria that was used, or did that just kind of end up how we ended up based on other criteria for sort of subdividing between the different categories in the roadway? And I guess same question for all the mobile categories.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mike, good question. Methodology we have used in past cycles when we've done the midpoint was to look at the number of projects submitted as a proxy for demand. And in this case, based on the dollars available, we got about halfway down all of the roadway lists.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Heidi.
Thank you. This is Heidi Scholl with STA. We did have a board meeting last night on the MVTA side, and there was a comment from a member of our TAB group that it's hard to ignore that Hennepin County is getting a large amount of funding. And I know that's sometimes how the scoring goes, but if it's based a lot on ridership or density, we might want to look at that scoring option in the future. I'm surprised no one else here has said anything about that, but it is very Hennepin County heavy.
Mr. Chair, maybe just a clarifying question, maybe for Eddie. Are you talking about a specific category? Application category?
Even when you were showing your screens, it's kind of across the board.
Just across the board. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that was acknowledged at TAB, but we do recognize that once we start adding the additional funding for the Carbon Reduction Act of Transportation, the over-programming, it does change the makeup of the projects being funded in the geographic balance area. So it does, once we get down, then we will do an analysis of the balance itself with the cities and the counties of how much funding is getting split within each area.
Perfect.
And that is one difference this time than it's changed over years, as where we gradually added over programming and then they increased the amount. And last year we put it all in from the start. And then there was like if you move a project, you got to take money away from somebody. So we said, we're not going to do that again. Let's have TAB have some money to have some flexibility of helping that geographic balance this next time around.
Yeah, I mean, our focus has always been the technical, right? We score based on technical analysis. The projects fall where they fall, and then it's up to TAB to look at geographical balance, equity. How do we maybe fund some more projects with some additional money or over programming? So those discussions are yet to happen, but will be forthcoming. So Cole?
Sorry if I missed this, Steve. When do you plan on pulling together the geographic balance summaries? And I know the last few cycles we've talked about doing it over time because it's, several cycles matters. And would that go to this group before TAB if you pull it together?
By me, you mean Joe, right?
Yeah. And I guess really quick follow-up though, like, will you wait until we add some of that new money in before you do that? That's maybe the bigger question.
Yeah, no, just joke. Yeah, joking there. Mr. Chair and members, yeah, I think we would build out those 3 scenarios, and then we would both map the projects in each of the scenarios, and then run the analysis. We did get a request from Dakota County Commissioner Mary Liz Holberg to run the numbers again over time. Not just one solicitation. You'll see how it balances out this cycle, but then over the long term too, just because of the chunkiness of projects. So thanks.
All right, next we have Cole. If you're done, we'll go to Nathan. Okay, Nathan.
Sure, I was just gonna ask something similar to Cole. I forgot to lower my hand, but it sounds like between Elaine and Steve, they mentioned that summary is not ready yet. Albeit like some anecdotal, like review of the first 2 pages. It's good to see like some applicants, Washington and Oka, Scott County are getting some big projects as well in the draft funding. So that's good to see this cycle as well.
And what we do have the analysis from previous years, so we just need to add in the numbers from the scenarios to the previous analyses.
All right, well, we'll look forward to seeing all that information in the future. Jason. Jason,
I think trying to figure out technology here, Chair. Thank you. So with the development of these additional scenarios, one thing that could happen is leapfrogging, and just wanted to note that probably wouldn't sit well with me. We have a pretty thorough data-driven evaluation process that leads to these final scores, and just recognize the potential for maybe a lower scoring project to leapfrog another one if we kind of really emphasize a certain scoring measure. So just something that I'd really have difficulty supporting. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Our intent is to not skip projects unless we are directed by TAB to do so. We would not develop a scenario that would skip over projects. So like with active transportation, we'd start at the top of those lists, the highest scoring projects, and essentially bump the money down, the federal money down as needed. With something like the safety scenario, well, if you look at the list, some of the things we put in there is like the high safety score. So you can see which project in each of the application categories gets the high safety score, and we're always funding that project just based on its other merits, and because it's the highest scoring measure in the whole solicitation as well. So it's kind of a combination there. But what we would do is we'd go to the next project, unfunded project on those lists, and kind of say, project A or project B, which one per dollar of investment or total project cost would drive the biggest safety benefit. So maybe project number 12 has a better BC ratio, but we wouldn't skip over 10 projects to get to that. It's kind of what the next projects on the list are, is how we're proposing to do it, at least.
Thank you. I got to step away for 1 minute. Sorry.
Any last questions?
Steve, sorry to hit you another question. I really like the approach you're doing this time and probably learning from last cycle of like layering this section first before all the other layers of money come in, because that got super complicated last time. I'm curious if TAB provided any questions of like, are you going to do sub-geographic balances of like all the different colors of money? Because it seems like that's like maybe even a theme I'm hearing of like between active transportation, where's the money going geographically versus this base 200 million funding. So I'm just curious if staff have any like thinking on that yet of like how all this feedback's coming at you in real time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Nathan. So I think we would add all of the money up, including active transportation, and probably do a number that way. I mean, you could see an argument of just doing all the federal funds and the active transportation, but and just thinking through that also I think would be difficult, as Chair Thompson said, because we've got several restrictions already on the active transportation dollars. To put like a geographic balance spin on it, I think it's not going to be possible because we're starting at the top of those lists, and $2 million meets the other requirements. Can go early. There's just like too much happening there. So now, after kind of talking that through, I think you would do it on all of the money that's being distributed, both active transportation and federal dollars, to get a better sense of where the money is going across the region.
All right. So what I heard is we're only leapfrogging Hennepin County projects.
You must have stepped away for the wrong part. Yeah.
Okay. No, this is all good information. Any other questions for Steve? Okay. See no more questions. I assume, Steve, if people do want to reach out, that you're available and can provide information. So anything else on this item, Steve, before we move to the scope change policy?
No, again, if people want to be part of that active transportation committee, or if they want to listen in on that, that's a virtual meeting on the 25th of April. I know you, Mr. Chair, are a member of that committee. Craig Jensen from F&P is on there. Jordan Kozak, Jenny Hager, Brian Isaacson, and maybe a few state aid also has a rep, Mark Breezy on that. But there's been other people from F&P and TAC that have just wanted to listen in to the conversation, and welcome you to do that. As far as kind of the next steps here, either at the TAC meeting in May, or for sure by the next TAB meeting, we'll have these other funding sources and the scenarios built out, and we'd go through those in detail. And I think what we'd be asking of TAB is like, do you like the three that we put together? Do you want more? Do you want to reduce any at this point? And more of those high level questions is what's going to be going back to TAB. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. All right, a lot of good information there and more to come. And we will move to the next informational item, which is the scope change policy update. So, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Chair and members. Let's see. This time I remember to hit the share button. Okay, so we have those of you who have been around know that we have been talking about the policies, the scope change policy and the program year policy for quite some time. And the work group assigned to do that has had one meeting recently to talk about the program year policy. And this is after concluding our scope change policy discussion. So I'm here to summarize some of what we talked about and some of the rationale behind why we're even having this discussion, and then share a bit of proposed language. And then depending on the feedback we get from this committee, from TAC, and from TAB, we would be likely to bring this back for approval next month, unless there's more work to be done, in which case it might not be next month. So with that, I'll give a little bit of a summary. So we've had a working group with a number of members from this group, from this committee, talking about these policies. And this is in light of recent trends and applications that are related to smaller projects being brought into larger projects. And in the case of the scope change policy, these kind of requests are not really addressed very well in the existing policy. The policy was sort of written for project changes that are very specific to the project, new termini, things like that. And so once we started having scope changes where we're taking out a piece of a project to put in another project and the on-the-ground results are different, we've sort of been operating a little bit with no policy for a while. So the primary questions that this group addressed are for the scope change are really two questions. One, should federal funds be retained for removed project elements being completed as part of another project? That's what we've been doing in the absence of policy direction. And two, should a scoring analysis be completed when the on-the-ground result is going to be the same? And I think, which would make no difference to the public. And I think in both cases, the answers were that what we've been doing, absent policy, has been the right approach. That funds should be retained for various reasons. I mean, because the on-the-ground result is the same, and because the applicant is usually spending funding on the other project being completed. And then secondly, that a scoring analysis doesn't seem necessary given that the project is being done in full, and who's doing the project in full and when it's being done isn't as important. So as shown in the attached document, and that's here where I have a number of track changes based on what's been happening in those meetings, the participants favor simplicity for requests that would not change the on-the-ground results of the project, regardless of who completes it. Highlights of the shown attached of the attachment here include that there's inclusion of several examples of project changes that don't need to go through the formal process, provided that the projects are going to be completed as applied for. In other words, the changes that we've been discussing, many of them wouldn't even have to come up before the committee process, because the on-the-ground result is going to be the same. That's something that we've talked about at various times when folks thought, do we really need to be talking about this? And now that this has been tracked into what you see on your screen, that's something that committees can talk about. Federal funding is retained because the transaction, i.e. the federal award in exchange for the project, would remain intact. Excuse me. So there's some exception. If the value of the project and the change exceeds what's in this table, it would come through the committee. So there was a little discomfort with having very large amounts of potential changes not coming through the process. And then if the project absorbing the applicant project has to be in the TIP or else in an agency approved capital program within the next 4 years. And the rationale for that was, yes, we think it's okay if you put your project element into some other project, but not if it's 10 years down the road. There has to be some a better understanding that it's going to happen in the near future, and then it's in something that it's in a document that really indicates that this project is going to happen. And so as long as all the project elements are retained, the federal funding would be retained. We didn't set a limit there. The overall thought was, I shouldn't say we didn't, these are all recommendations from the committee, but they didn't propose a limit there. The overall thought was if it's on the ground the same, then it's really all the same to everybody. There's also some changes here not specifically related to moving projects to other elements. Elements of projects to other projects. For example, informal scope changes can have a federal funding retention of up to $100,000. And the rationale there was we've struggled for a long time with very small changes coming through the process, changes that really are part of the are really on the informal changes list, but because there's a little bit of federal funding that should come out, as a staff member, I personally have been very hesitant to want to give the go-ahead for anybody to keep federal funding if they're doing something to diminish. So anytime that happens, they can either not take their funding or they can go through the process. So the idea here is that small changes with small funding changes would not have to come through the process. This solves the issue of having these kind of minor things coming through. The $100,000 isn't necessarily a magic number. We can talk about that, but it's a amount that made sense at the time at the meetings. There's some clarification here that changing a transit project from a vehicle purchase to leasing vehicles is not subject to the formal change process. This was added as a result of a recent request that we had. and folks were comfortable thinking that this is not changing the project in substance. So it doesn't need to be a scope change. And again, that's just something that we thought was a little bit vague in the bullets of what is an informal scope change, what is a formal scope change, et cetera. And then finally, any federal funding reduction resulting from the reduction of project elements determined to be less than $50,000 would be retained by the applicant. So what this is meant to address is the dilemma of when to reduce federal funding projects when elements are removed. For example, when we come into a request and funding elements are removed, we've tended to have this discussion of because elements are removed, should the funding be removed? And the answer to that question has been, well, technically yes, but it's not worth it with a small amount of money. So the $50,000, again, not necessarily a magic number, but that amount was chosen. So we don't have to go through the question of whether or not the funding should be retained and whether or not it's worth it to retain a small amount of funding. Key pieces here, I hope people had a chance to read it because this is kind of hard to explain in one fell swoop. But if that, and some of you who have been at the meetings, I'm here for questions.
All right, any questions? Jim?
Mr. Chair, Jim Kislucher, Fridley, just wanted to clarify on table 1. So there's like how do the removal thresholds work? And are they is that like a minimum for those that show a percentage and a range, or a percentage and a number?
So it's more of a maximum. Let me see. This was a challenging table, and it's challenging for me to articulate. For a small project, for example, of $500,000, if 20% of the element of the project is removed to another project, then it would have to go through the process. And then in these other ones, we also use 20%, but we also have flat funding amounts. So in a $1 million to $7 million project, at least $500,000 or 20% of the value of the project would be moving to another project. If that's the case, if it's that number or higher, then we would go through the process. If it's not, we would call it an administrative modification. I hope that makes sense. If anybody on the committee wants to better articulate it than me, please do. So what this is trying to address is that folks really thought that this could be done, but not necessarily if it's a really big project or a really big part of a project.
All right. Any other questions, comments for Joe? Or other committee members that were on this committee that want to say a few things? I know Colleen and some others were on this one.
Chair, this is Jason from Hennepin.
Yeah, Jason.
Just a couple of things that resulted in a lot of dialogue. So when project elements were removed from the applicant's project and going over to another project to be completed by another entity, kind of how is that documented, and where the public knows that those improvements will still take place, kind of throughout, is an agreement needed or a contract? And we kind of landed on a letter of commitment, just saying that contracts include a lot of administrative processes for our respective agencies, and kind of felt like the letter of commitment was the right level of procedure. And then secondly, lots of discussion on removal thresholds, probably be forever. But one project element that's pretty common is traffic signal systems. And unfortunately, they've been impacted most by construction cost escalation. So I think that'll be a sticking point for the future, as a lot of our signals include a lot of our projects include signal revisions or replacements, and those include high price tags. So maybe something for us to monitor moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Okay. Joe, are you looking for anything? This is just basically an informational item. Do you need any more feedback or anything from the committee at this time?
Chair, not necessarily. I was anticipating more questions and talk, but we don't need it.
Okay. Well, we have Cole. Cole, you can jump in.
Yeah, just thinking back to this St. Louis Park example that we're all so fond of. One of the big parts there was the local planning process they went to and the response to the community feedback on the project. Is that discussed at all in the scope change in terms of a key consideration that applicants should make sure to document that with their scope change? Like, what was the feedback we heard? I mean, the St. Louis Park, if I remember, provided quite a bit of information to that effect, and I think it's helpful to see if you are doing a scope change like they proposed. So I'm just wondering if that's mentioned in the policy.
Chair and Cole, no, it's not mentioned in the policy. It's written when applicable in the responses, but not all scope changes are responsive to public comment. Sometimes it's just an issue of whatever the railroad not cooperating or something like that. So there's not really a requirement per se. It's not really in the policy.
Cole, any follow up?
Well, I guess I look at it as something that we should not require, but we should encourage applicants to include if there was something. I agree with Joe that it's not always going to be the case in every project, but and so maybe it doesn't belong in the policy, but it's sort of like a best practice, nice to have for F&P when you're bringing something forward if that was a component. So I don't know if there's another place where that stuff exists, like how to write a good scope change. That would be maybe a different question than the actual policy itself.
Okay. All right, Heidi and then Nathan.
Hi, thank you. Cole, I actually agree with your comment. I also think when you're applying, you have to do community outreach. That was a requirement in applications. So to me, it would make sense that it's in the policy if there's some type of follow-up because of that scope change. It seems like it would go hand in hand.
Thank you for that comment. Nathan, you have a comment on this item as well?
Yeah, Chair and Joe, thanks for highlighting this. It was a really long and complicated conversation. And I think one of the things that's good to highlight with the group is this isn't meant to cover all the exceptions. It's meant to try to like apply more broadly and reduce the increasing and ongoing administrative burdens, both with applicants and with our federal aid partners who are going to see tons of new projects come through, just given the higher amount of federal funding coming to the region. And as we think about TAC-TAB and the subcommittees and what our roles are, you know, one of the things we talked about is like, how do we evaluate these for the funding and not make it another layer of like, well, do we have to be the gatekeepers of engagement or design decisions? It's more about, are they aligning the scope and how does the scope change relate to retaining the federal funding? So trying to walk a fine line between all of those, but making transparent decisions through all these subcommittees that TAB can ultimately approve, deny, or whatever decisions are made. So I don't think it would be trying to be the decider of the design to some of the comments. I think it can be helpful if it helps inform some of that, but I don't think we'd want to add an extra layer where we're all defending our engagement or designs at these levels.
All right, thank you, Nathan, for that comment. Okay, good discussion on this. Joe, appreciate the information. And so remind me, is this officially coming back for adoption or?
Chair, It will be at some point, depending on what you mean by officially. We'll see what other committees have to say, and I would imagine we'll see it as more of an action item either next month or the following.
Okay. Right. So if you have further comments, yeah, I would just encourage you to reach out to staff or one of the committee members that was on the committee. So, all right. Looks like there's no additional discussion on this item, so I think that concludes our informational items. Thank you, Joe, for the presentation on that. Next, we have other business, and we have none listed unless there's agency updates, if anybody has any important updates they'd like to quickly share. Seeing none, we stand adjourned here at 2:42. Thank you, everybody.